A disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher, and the slave like the master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone therefore who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward.
We are at the end of chapter 10. I know it's a big block, but it all goes together. Jesus has been giving instructions to the 12 disciples of what's going to happen and what they're going to do when they leave. It's going to look really weird on the film. when they go out. But one of the things he says several times is about change and how people fear change. Any of you fear change? No. Yes, we all fear change. I was thinking about that, and I remember as a kid, I used Crest toothpaste. How many of you remember or still use Crest toothpaste? And you don't use Crest, probably Susan, you use Colgate, right?
I used to use Crest, now I use Colgate.
Okay. It was either Crest or Colgate. And of all the products that I've used throughout the years, my loyalty was to Crest. And in the mid or so early 90s, when Warner Lambert came out with Listerine toothpaste, and yes, it tastes as bad as it sounds, for 10 cents a tube with a wife and 3 kids, bargain, right? So I brought it home and everybody tried it. Need I tell you what they thought of Listerine toothpaste? Even I said, out the door it goes for a dime, we'll go back to the $2. Back then it was like $2 a tube. Back to Crest. And I really like Crest, but sometimes you have to change. Because as you get older, as us old people know, your teeth get sensitive. So now our brand is Sensodyne. You know, they make like 5 different ones now for that because us old people have. And it doesn't work 100%, but if I use Crest, it's like, okay, this is not a good thing. So there are times, right, Bart, change is good. And there are times, oh, maybe not so much. But Jesus is telling them, people fear change. And people are going to get very angry with you because you're promoting change. he promoted a different way of interpreting Scripture. Remember last week we talked about interpreting morality, and he said, out you go, and look what's going to happen to you. So I wanted to take a look at the biblical notes, and no, I did not expect you to be able to read that, but I did bring them up one at a time. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a slave above his master. Jesus tells his disciples they are never going to know everything he knows. We are never going to know everything he knows because he's divine and he knows more than we do. But he's going to teach them everything that he can. So they're going to become as good as. And it's a little different today because you want someone you're teaching to become better than you. That's the success of a good teacher. But in that particular time period when he's talking with his disciples, he's saying, you're going to learn everything I can tell you, but you're not going to ever be better than me because he knows a little bit more. So we have to remember, even if we think we know everything the gospel says, there's a whole bunch of stuff we don't know yet. And just bear that in mind. That's like a little humbling thing to let them know. And then I thought this was interesting in 27. See at the bottom it says, proclaim upon the housetop. We would use the word roof today, wouldn't we? Now, if you got up on this church roof at the very top, I don't know about you, but it would scare the bejeebers out of me because it's on this big slant and I'd be afraid of falling. But in Jesus' day, the house roofs were flat. And they were made of branches and thatch and other things. And they would be a ladder on the side of the house that you could climb up because you're constantly having to fix the roof because when the rainy season hits. But there was very few public places that you could go and have conversations. So people used to go to the rooftops and have conversations up there. And the interesting thing is about the whisper in your ear, proclaiming it from the rooftops. Let me get to the next one here. Woo-hoo. Did I get to the next one? I didn't. Okay, well, we'll keep going that way. Yeah, I think I did. Okay, this isn't working now. So, preach it from the rooftop. First, let me ask you this. How many of you like gossip? Church doesn't have any gossip in it, does it? No. And people don't like gossip, do they? No. That's why so many watch the old fake news. People like gossip. So Jesus is saying to them, I'm going to give you the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. And I want the world to know about it. So when you go up to those rooftops, talk about the kingdom of heaven and say, this is something you don't tell anybody else. And you know even today, as Anna's smiling, that if I say that to you, it's all the way down the delta before I even get out of the place. Probably Bailey does sit there and text it for me. So everybody knows about it, right? Okay, it's working. Amen. So when he was saying, when you think about it for a moment, when Jesus said, don't tell anybody I cured you, I mean, it was several weeks ago, we said one possibility was he didn't want to insult the healers who couldn't do it. Another is, thinking about this, he knew that if I told you don't talk about it, what are you going to do? You're going to go talk about it. And the world could find out more about him. Then in 28 it talks about, do not fear those who kill the body and unable to kill the soul. Jesus, and we said this last week also, Jesus' main concern for us is our souls, not our body. Because we know that the body is mortal, it's going to die. But what happens to your soul? That's what's of most concern. Do you want to be in heaven with him, or do you want to be elsewhere? And elsewhere could be a very bad place. We happen to call it hell. We think of hell, by the way, as fire and brimstone and Satan and spears and all that other stuff. In Jesus' day, hell was a place, and I think that's the next slide, of mental suffering and inner torment. You know, you ever do something wrong and you get that guilty feeling and it just kind of gnaws away at you? I know most of you never did anything that bad, but it just keeps getting at you. Hell was considered a place where you could not talk to God anymore. And people feared that more than anything. It wasn't a specific place. There was The personification of Satan is just getting started. The scripture uses the word Beelzebub. That's the concept that was just getting started. But for the average person, being disconnected from God, that's hell. That would be mental suffering and inner torment. So he's worried about our souls after our lives here. And then I thought therefore everyone I could read who confesses me before men. And I wondered, what does confessing mean? And confessing in his day meant practicing his ways. Not just saying, I'm with Jesus. No, you had to practice all these things he taught them. He wanted them to go out and tell people about it and tell them about these righteous ways. But what good is it if you are saying, be righteous, and then you turn around and do things that are not? So you have to walk your walk and talk your talk, and that's what he's talking about here. So when we confess Jesus out there, not only are we telling with our mouth, but we're also showing with our actions. It reminded me of, 20 years ago, the WWJD. What would Jesus do, everybody? He was wearing the little bracelets and all that good stuff. Think about that. That's confessing Jesus, because if Jesus wouldn't do it, you shouldn't be doing it. Jesus offered something quite interesting, and we call that the kingdom of heaven. And this verse really has thrown me for years until this week when I got to read about it. Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth, but I came to bring a sword. And I'm like, wait a minute. You mean the man of peace who's going to forgive us and offer salvation and eternal life and is all this great stuff, and he came to bring a sword? A double-edged sword, no doubt. That doesn't make any sense. But this is an expression that was used during his day to talk about change brings strife. You're going to go out there and tell them about change. What did prophets do in the past? They would show up and say, hey, David, adultery, bad thing. Now, do you think that brought him kudos and a big pile of gold? No, it brought strife. And when the prophets would tell the people of Israel, you're not pleasing God, you got to change your way. Oh, there's that change word again. And that causes strife. So this verse is not that Jesus is bringing a sword. It's that his ways are going to cause change and get people angry because we don't like change. I can't ask you this because you're in different seats, but this morning I said, how many of you are in the same seat that you've been in since you've been in this place? That was everybody. Raise their hands on that. We don't like change. But then I said, now don't feel bad about it, because when I go to the Giant at the Delco Plaza, I park basically in the same place. Now, why do I do that? Because I want to be able to find my car when I get out. And if I park somewhere else, I don't know where my car is, and I get a little concerned. I bet you do the same thing. I go to the Red Lion Giant. I always park on the bakery side near one of those awnings, because it's a little busier out there than by us. But that way I can find my car. So sometimes change isn't a bad thing, and we're not saying all change is bad. A lot of change is good. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Wow, it's like a delay there. And then we come up to this verse 35. We actually saw this last week. This is a repeat of the Micah 7 passage. And this is the daughter against mother and the whole bit. If you go to Micah 7:6 and read what he was saying, this is an expression, an old Aramaic expression, talking about strife in families. Because some people were going to say, I want to be part of the Jesus movement. I want to be like him. I'm going to go do this and do that. I mean, think of the 12 guys. They left their families. I don't think their wives would have been too happy about it. So I'm sure it might have caused a little bit of strife in there, wouldn't it? And he's telling you that. That's what that verse is all about. It's Micah 7:6 if you want to look for it. Change, especially bringing the kingdom of heaven to us, And that change that did occur and is still occurring, it's going to cause trouble. It's strife. Those who don't want to are going to be upset by it. And then came this take up the cross. And I thought that was always interesting, and what I always read about it was, how could Jesus say, take up your cross, when he's not at the cross yet? He doesn't know that he's going to die that way. You know, they had other ways of killing people than the cross. They had the thing called the lions. Now, you could decide whether you wanted to be, now you couldn't back then, but now, would you rather hang on the cross for 3 days or be lunch for a lion? Okay, either way kind of stinks. But what I found was taking up your cross is an old expression that was known during his day, because when the Romans took over 68, 70 years prior, actually 100 by the time Jesus is ready for the cross, they were crucifying people all over the place in Judea. That was the main thing. And nobody really wanted it. And to take up your cross meant to take up the challenge. So when Jesus says, pick up your cross, he's saying to his disciples, it is time for you to take the challenge of going out there and talking about the kingdom of heaven and getting in trouble with all the strife and the change and dealing with it and learning to do it. That's what they were doing at this point. And he's telling them honestly, ain't going to be easy. See, he's still dealing with change and how to deal with it. And it's going to happen. The prophet's reward I thought was interesting, because I want to know what a prophet's reward is. And from ancient times, if you followed a prophet whose predictions came true, so it's a true prophet, it was believed that you would receive blessings from God through the prophet, because you're doing something that pleases God. So if you're going to confess Jesus, then do what he said, then you're going to receive blessings from God because you did it. So that's a reward for going through all this strife. And the last one was a cup of water. Wow, who would deny a kid a cup of water? Well, we had Elliot and Jesse over, and they were what? They're 6 and 3. And let me ask you, for those who remember, when your kids were little, did you give them a big cup of water before putting them to bed? No, because they're going to pee everywhere. You know, we know that. Well, guess what? They knew that in ancient days. So they would not give children water. They'd let them go thirsty to bed. But if the child started crying out, I really got to have a glass of water, what parent would not bring them a glass of water? Even though we all know what's going to happen. And it's not going to be pretty. So he's talking about a big reward for those who you talk to and they ask for more help and they want to confess Jesus. You need to help them. So it's just an example out of, I bet anything, the battery just died on this. What else can go wrong?
Don't ask.
I'm just going to walk out and with it. Luckily, it's a small group. Okay, so there's change that is good, and there's change that is bad. Now, I'm going to go over a couple things in conclusion here. These are changes that I don't think anybody would say, I want to go back to. So there are good changes, right, Barb? Okay, should we show you the first one? See, I had to pretend what they were earlier. Who wants to go back to an outhouse? Now, I admit, I was a city boy, but we did take a youth group up past Williamsport to one of those campsites. And we had those 4-seaters. You know, teenagers won't use 4-seaters. Even though it's either all boy or all girl, they won't do it. I'm sorry, it's like going in a porta potty. No offense to anyone with an outhouse. That's why I live in the city. That's why I like plumbing. But you all want to go back to that, don't you? Yes. So I want to smack him. How about a rotary telephone that weighs like 20 pounds on a short cord? And it's like, oh, this thing is just, and dialing it up. And around here, if you did long distance, you had to tell the operator what your phone number was. That was crazy. I didn't have to do that in New York City in the 60s, and I'd come out here in the 80s, and I dial long distance, Sandy, and the operator goes, phone number, please. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Who gives a phone number out? Do you really want to do that? Well, if you don't want to do that, then I know you don't want to. Poop. How about that one? How many of you want to go back to the block cell phone? This is the first truly portable cell phone. I had one. How many of you had one? They weighed about 20 pounds. Yeah, Bill, you can admit it. You and I had them. We're geeks. And they were huge. And the battery lasted, about 3 minutes, if it's that long. You watch some of the old 90s shows and the guys I think in the X-Files at the beginning, they pull out the block phones.
They had one, they had the antenna that would go on it.
Well, yeah, the antenna's there.
Exactly.
But then we had the ones that went on our cars, but they were bad phones and you couldn't travel with them. This was, you want to go back to that opposed to your small little iPhone, Dennis? Well, you want to go back to an outhouse. I figured you wanted this. Okay, you don't want that. How about 8-track tapes? Yeah! That sucker's back. Anybody have 8-track? How many of you had them once in your past?
Oh, yeah.
You still have you like when they change track in the middle of the song? Ya da 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 ya da da da.
It flipped itself. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was a horrible thing they came out with. And when 1984 came along, and I said to Sandy, I wish we had an Encyclopedia Britannica when I was a kid, because the one we had was the one my grandfather bought for my mother in 1938, and here it is 1968, which makes it worthless. So we bought, and it looked like that, didn't it? Right? Our set was the red set. That was the 2,000-year set.
Or the World Book Encyclopedia.
You got a World Book. You were smart. You got the cheaper one. But we got the Britannica in 1984. You know what? I bought every yearbook up to 2000 until I realized this is a major waste of money. Because I figured my kids, they don't have to run to the library. I'll have the encyclopedia. How many times they opened it? 0. I opened it more than they opened it. Because by then they could get everything on the internet. Oh, by the way, if you do have a set, June does have one she's willing to sell. I think she wants $1,000 for it, but you can't even give them away. You might as well just toss them into your fireplace and have a good time. We could always do that, encyclopedia fire. Everyone bring it, we'll make a big pit. How many of you want to go back to manual brakes? That's a master cylinder. It's showing. My grandfather had an Oldsmobile, and then when I was in college in 1978, and I went to visit my grandmother, she said, you drive me around because that's the way it was. Okay, that's fine. And he had manual steering and manual brake. You know what it's like when one of those 4-ton Oldsmobiles, and you're going, ugh. I mean, I'm 19 years old and this hurts. And then you have to push on the brake, and then you got to push on the brake.
It was a Delta 88 Oldsmobile.
That would do it.
Ooh,
Yeah.
all right.
So you want to go back to manual brakes? No, I didn't think so. I only have a couple more. How about manual transmissions?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to have a clutch, right? Not. According to Ford in 2020 in their Mustangs, they're not even going to put these in anymore. Except for the specials. Because now you have the paddles. Drop it into drive, and you could drive it with the paddles. You don't need a manual. And when we first looked at the Mustang, the salesman brought out and put on a manual, and I said, I can't drive a manual, I need an automatic. He goes, oh, I could teach you how to do that. And I thought, how many clutches later are you going to give me? Yeah, I could drop a clutch, that's pretty easy. I don't want to go back to that, do you? No. And how many remember the IBM XT that took 15 minutes to warm up? Oh my gosh, and look at that tube, itty bitty thing, and it was a curved tube. You really want to go back to that from your cell phone, right, Dennis? Since you want the outhouse, you probably want that on your desk. Actually, if you had a nice, beautiful one, it's actually worth some money nowadays for a museum piece. Terrible computer. It was a good computer at the time.
Yeah.
And of course, who could forget vacuum tubes? Well, Joy's probably too young. Bailey doesn't even know what we're looking at right now, I'm sure. The rest of us old people, we can remember vacuum tubes. Remember your TV was all black and white? Oh my gosh, I think I skipped that picture. Yeah, I did. But I had a picture of a Zenith in there also. How many had a Zenith black and white? It was 11-inch screen. It was about that deep because it had all those crazy tubes in it. And the tubes were cool to watch because a little electric could make little sparks and whatnot. And you were fixing it more than you. Who wants that? So there are good changes. Jesus is all about change. That's what he's talking about in here. And churches now have to start looking at what changes have been occurring inside of society, because maybe we have to change to some of these things. There are certain things I don't think we would want to change to. But younger people are attracted by different things. That's where multimedia starts to come in. That's where bands start coming in. It's different and it's change. But we have to remember, there are some things that are good change. There are some things that are bad change. But overall, Jesus wanted change because his society needed it pretty badly. And today, I think Jesus needs the kingdom of heaven here. I think we need, I should say, the kingdom of heaven here.
Amen.
So let's come together and give to God his blessing, his portion of our blessings, and then you come forward.